Neoliberalism is perhaps the most influential ideology of the last 50 years. Neoliberalism has reshaped human society. Society as we know it is inseparable from the influence of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a political ideology. Neoliberalism is associated with political figures such as Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and in my own country, Roger Douglas. Neoliberalism is associated with intellectuals such as Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek. Neoliberalism is first and foremost an economic ideology. Neoliberalism pursues privatization, deregulation, cuts to social services, union busting, and flatter taxes. Neoliberalism values personal responsibility and harsh individualism. It is my view that neoliberalism is illiberal. Liberalism is a political ideology born out of the Enlightenment. On a philosophical level, liberalism values reason and progress. On a political level, liberalism values freedom, democracy, equality, individual rights, secularism, and the rule of law. On an economic level, liberalism values private property rights, private ownership of the means of production, and free markets. Neoliberalism exists in conflict with the political values of liberalism. Neoliberalism creates enormous economic inequality, and in doing so, rejects the value of equality. Enormous economic inequality has been a consequence of neoliberalism. This is an empirical fact. This is also a logical necessity. When you flatten tax rates, the rich pay less and everyone else pays more. The result is an ever-increasing wealth divide. When you cut social services, you make it harder for ordinary people to get ahead. You kill equality of opportunity, and inequalities become entrenched. Privatization allows for more and more wealth to be extracted from the public, and increasingly larger profits to be made. Neoliberalism rejects the liberal value of equality. Neoliberalism also rejects the liberal value of democracy. Wealth is power. When economic inequality increases, democracy is increasingly undermined. A smaller and smaller group wields increasingly disproportionate political power. Wealth easily translates into political power. The greater the wealth divides, the more the upper class comes to dominate the political system. This undermines democracy. Deregulation and the destruction of trade unions puts workers at the mercy of their employers. This is a deeply undemocratic arrangement with workers having no power. Neoliberalism puts workers at the mercy of autocratic business owners by destroying workers' rights and crushing trade unions. Being at the mercy of a dictatorial capitalist is a fundamentally undemocratic arrangement. Neoliberalism is a rejection of democracy. Under neoliberalism, the state takes a reduced role. This means that people have less democratic control over their society. Autocratic private firms begin to take up an increasingly dominant role in the society. Such firms lack the accountability mechanisms of a democratic state. Soon we have a society where unelected business owners make increasingly influential decisions. This undermines democracy. Neoliberalism rejects the liberal value of democracy. Neoliberalism also rejects the liberal value of freedom. The state is not the only danger to human liberty. Private firms are more than capable of oppressing and exploiting. By destroying trade unions and crushing workers' rights, neoliberalism reduces the freedom of workers. Workers increasingly exist as the powerless servants of dictatorial capitalists. When workers lack protections and leverage, they have less freedom. Neoliberalism condemns workers to a tyrannical state of affairs, as they have no rights and no power once unions have been destroyed and the economy thoroughly deregulated. Neoliberalism rejects the liberal value of freedom. Neoliberalism is an illiberal ideology. Neoliberalism rejects the core political values of liberalism: freedom, equality, and democracy. Neoliberalism despises these things. In pursuit of liberalism's economic values, neoliberalism sacrifices liberalism's political values. The opposite is true of socialism. Socialism rejects the economic values in pursuit of the political values. The free market, private property, and private ownership of the means of production. Socialism rejects these things in pursuit of a more economically equal society. Socialism rejects these things in pursuit of a society where workers are free. Socialism rejects these things in pursuit of a society that is more democratic. Socialism seeks to address the often harsh side of liberalism: the economic principles that threaten freedom, undermine democracy, and produce inequality. Through decommodification and worker control over and ownership of the means of production, socialism seeks to pursue the political values of liberalism while rejecting liberalism's economic values. This is because there is a fundamental contradiction between the political values of liberalism and the economic values of liberalism. These values are ultimately incompatible. Liberalism is founded on a contradiction. Neoliberalism and socialism both seek to address that contradiction. Neoliberalism embraces the economic principles to the detriment of the political principles. Socialism embraces the political principles to the detriment of the economic principles. Neoliberalism and socialism are two of the great political ideologies of our time. One would be wise to understand them.